In this episode, we'll be discussing novels to inspire your Dungeons & Dragons campaigns. Good evening and welcome to Attacks of Opportunity. I'm your host, John Sprunk, and with me, as before, is...
Eric Hardenbrook. Hooray, I didn't scare him away.
Yeah, you did not. Our last video proved pretty popular, so welcome back. And thank you for being on again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I like this. This is fun.
Yeah, it was awesome. Last time was a blast. I'm hoping this will be too, and make some sweet music together. So today's topic is we each picked our top 5 books, fiction books, novels, that inspire us in regards to D&D/gaming. And I don't know what Eric's 5 are. I have not told him my 5, so we're going to discover this on the fly. And if you're ready, Eric, why don't you go first and give me, you can go from the bottom up, like your number 5, in order.
Okay. So I threw some random parameter thoughts together here before we even really kind of dig into that.
Okay.
Because first and foremost, read anything and everything. The more you read, the more inspiration you're going to find, right? The more stuff you dig into, the greater versatility you're going to have with your game. And it doesn't just have to be fantasy novels. It can be anything. If you can relate things together in new and interesting ways, that's going to keep things fresh for people. And I think that's really important. So that was like sort of straight out the gate. Read anything. It doesn't have to be the top 5 or whatever. And for this stuff, I didn't go with, I think I mentioned the last time I was on here, that the starting point, the genesis of all this stuff for me was The Hobbit. So I didn't actually put The Hobbit on my list because everyone does that. And it's true. The world building is amazing. It's so incredibly detailed. And it's one of the things that I get hung up on a lot when I'm reading other books. So I took that one off the list. And I took some other ones off the list that I'm gonna set that, what I kept off the list, the rest of it for later.
Okay.
So my 5 are not in any particular order. These are 5 that I think if you're looking for inspiration, you should go read these things, and I can tell you why.
Okay.
So
now,
and this does.
Go ahead. I'll ask you a quick question first before we get into the actual books. I take a lot of inspiration for my campaigns from books, movies, that kind of thing. I'm not above stealing an entire concept if it's good enough and interesting enough. How about you? Do you just borrow whatever you like from media or not?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm going to hope that none of my players are listening because this is sort of a secret. But there's a thing that I found. It was actually in a novel where the character in the novel wore a gold bracelet around their ankle with a gold chain trailing out behind their foot through a hole in whatever their footwear was so that the gold touched the ground, because that was how they stayed connected to the earth through that elemental metal. So that if someone was, if there was some, the way I've modified it is if there's some attack that's using, like fire or air or water or something like that, you can use that trick if you have that ankle chain touching the ground to ground out certain magic.
Okay.
I snatched that wholesale from a novel. I was like, oh, that is a fabulous idea. I'm taking that and I'm porting it along over to my game.
All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that because that way I won't feel bad when I same thing. Okay. Well, why don't you kick this off if you're ready then, buddy?
Sure. So, like I said, no particular order. And this is the only one I don't have a physical copy on hand. Throne of the Crescent Moon by Saladin Ahmed from Daw Books in 2012. It's a great book. First and foremost, it's a great book. It's not a traditional lead character for an adventure book. The main character is older, heavier, not like your strapping, I fling a sword around kind of a guy. There's mystery in it, but above and beyond that, it's not a traditional quasi-medieval setting. It's very Middle Eastern in a lot of the aspects of it. There are genies, there's shifting sands, there's the Caliph, there's all of these things that are not your traditional, like when you think fantasy, you're like, oh, great, swords and horses, here we go. And this is not that. Okay. And I was blown away. There's so much cool stuff in there. So like if you're doing any kind of desert campaign, any kind of, tropical, that kind of thing, where there's tribes and genies and missing temples in the sands, all that kind of stuff. It's fantastic inspiration, along with being a great book.
Nice, very good. Okay, I've heard of that one. I haven't read it myself yet, but I'll put it on my list to be read. And have you borrowed anything specifically from that book for one of your adventures yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
But there's a stack of little things that I was like, oh, I need that. I'm like taking notes. There's like Post-it notes.
Cool. All right. Not in any order really. I mean, I kind of have mine ordered in the way they came to me, which probably is an important subconscious, but we'll discuss that later. My first one's going to be the one you cut out. It is The Hobbit / Lord of the Rings by Tolkien. It's the first real fantasy, like not a little kid book that I ever read. I know The Hobbit was written for children pretty much, but it's a full like novel with no pictures in it really, and it's got a map, which is very cool for a kid. But like you said earlier, it's a quintessential quest, go on a journey. You got all your standard D&D races, your elves, your dwarves, your halflings. You meet all the usual monsters and stuff, and dragons, which is awesome. And I love about these books, of course, which most people do, for D&D, the aspect of it's about how a normal person can find their courage and make a difference in the world. And which I think that much sums up like every heroic D&D campaign ever. You go from nothing to you want to become like these people that, affect world politics and take on archfiends and dragons. And so for obvious reasons, The Hobbit / Lord of the Rings is top of my list and top of my heart.
Honestly, it is for me too. But like I said, I knew that was going to come up on a list. It comes up every time. So I went for things that weren't necessarily just that.
Okay, cool. No, that's great. I'm glad you did. And that makes me think of a book I wish I had on my list, and I might just tack it on to the end of the video. We'll see. Okay. The next one on your list, my friend.
So the next one, which, like I said, I have them actually all on hand.
Oh, yeah. Oh, let me put The Hobbit up. This is my version of The Hobbit.
That's the same version I have.
Yeah. Classic.
Absolutely. Lawrence Watt Evans, The Misenchanted Sword. This one, empires at war, there's knights, there's wizards, there's miscast spells. And the best part of this one, for my mind, if you're going to lift something for your game, this one has a cursed sword. Mm-hmm. So it's a great example of, and then you can totally use this for your characters of, okay, you wished for an enchanted sword. Well, now you have one, but it doesn't do what you think it does. Or it does exactly what you think it does up to 100 times, and then it turns on you. Yeah, okay. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff in there that's just really cool. It's the setting the setting is actually the two countries have been at war for so long they don't even remember what they're at war over.
Okay.
And there's just this grumpy old wizard who's like, oh, you want to spell, huh? Okay. So it's great for characterization for something like that. But like I said, the real key to that one is if you want to start dreaming up curses, that's a great one. That's a great example.
Now, is that sort of along the lines of like Stormbringer from the Elric saga as far as cursed weapons go, or not quite on that superhero level?
No, I don't think it's on the superhero level.
Okay.
I don't remember. It's been a while since I've read it, honestly.
That's really cool. I have a friend who, when he DMs my friend Nick, every item you get that's magical, you have to beware because he loves cursed items. So it really, everything has a double side to it. But
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing. It's very easy to fall into that trap of, oh, it's magic, it must be wonderful. Oh, it's magic, I need to have it. Oh, it's so you get these characters who are like, oh, there's a magic something in there. I go and I get it, I grab it. And they're like, okay, it's yours.
yeah, I mean, it's not really the typical D&D, but have you? Oh, we're getting off topic a little bit. But a different book is that the Magicians of. No, I'm sorry, Master of the Five Magics. I'm not sure if you've read that fantasy novel from the '80s. Just ties in when they enchant an item, it always has a fault to it. Like if you have a dagger and they enchant it, it takes a lot of money to enchant it, and it will last forever, but the blade will be dull and you can't sharpen it. So it's decorative. It'll last forever. So I imagine a D&D campaign where everything's like that, and the player just go, "This sucks," because every sword we find is perfect except it can't hurt anybody.
Yeah, that was the author's last name was Hardy, I think.
You think? Yes.
Yeah, that one's out there on the shelf too. That's another great one.
Yeah, this chat probably go on forever.
You're sneaking them in. Well, he's sneaking them in. I got 5 and maybe some other ones on the side.
Yeah, it'll be 20 before we're done for each of them. Okay, my second one is the Conan saga. Again, I'm going with classic, mostly pulp stuff here. I love it because it's a big, bold, brawling saga that just makes no excuses for what it is, doesn't try to pretend it's something else. It's bloody, it's gory, it's sexist, it's probably racist. Howard was a Texan back in the day, and probably some stuff leaked in. But I love Conan. He's this bigger than life hero that just strides across his world like he owns it. And I think that like every fledgling D&D player has this idea in their mind, I'm going to make my Conan. And he's going to start first level as a barbarian or a fighter, and he's going to just take over the world and kill everything in his path, and nothing can beat him. And if you like that sort of fantasy, I don't think anybody beats Conan for that type of fantasy.
Oh, absolutely correct. And it's not bound to a single place either. Conan travels all over. I mean, part of the time he's a pirate. He's on a ship. They go to, I forget which one it is, where they go to an island.
All over.
They delve into this temple that's there. They find these people that have been forgotten. There's all kinds of cool stuff in that one.
Yeah, it's funny that Tolkien always gets labeled like as a travel log, right? He made a world and then he takes us through it like a tour guide. But the Fellowship does not go to every land in Middle Earth. I think Conan eventually goes to every single country, probably every city that was on that huge map, and even off the map at the end to the New World. I mean, Conan goes literally everywhere before it's all said and done. And the artwork by Frazetta. Frazetta.
Yes.
I mean, those covers, just looking at those paintings makes me want to play D&D. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a whole separate video. That's another topic, man.
Yeah, the art direction.
Art and D&D. Yeah. Because those things are inseparable in my mind. To the point where I actually backed a movie that's out now. So, yeah, let's...
You got to be hopeful, right?
Oh, it's out. It's in there. The Kickstarter was successful. It's out. It's called Eye of the Beholder. It's on Amazon right now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So let's put a pin in that one. We'll come back to art because I have a lot to say on that one. I love me some D&D art.
Maybe we can pull Lou Anderson for that one too. He was an art director for Pyre Books, so that could
would
be
be
a good Freeway
fantastic.
video.
Hey, there you go.
But we're
Look,
segueing. Sorry,
we're expanding our world.
Yeah. Okay. Back to you, my friend.
Okay. I'm going to jump back old school and see if you have this one on your list. Thieves' World, Robert Asprin.
You got it, buddy.
Yeah, see, there it is.
Yours is shinier than mine.
I think it's just my lighting.
Oh, yeah, mine's been read so many times, it's coming apart on me.
I actually just started reading it again.
Yeah,
I picked it up. I was like, I need to dig back into that one. And the first story was like right through.
I love that. I love that whole series. Yeah. Tell me about it. What do you love about it?
So the cool thing about that is, number one, where they start off with in the city, it's all rogues, sneaks, assassins, dirty guards. Like you could pay someone off, you can get whatever you need. There's areas of the city that they're like, you shouldn't go there. You'll probably get stabbed.
A wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Hey, there you go. And the nice thing about that particular series is it's shared world. So that it's not just one novel, it's a bunch of short stories. So you get a whole collection of really fantastic authors putting stuff out in this collection. Robert Asprin, I like his work anyway. I really liked his Myth series.
Yes.
Those are really fantastic also. But so it's not just him. I think, who else is in that book? God, there's a ton of them. Joe Haldeman.
Yeah.
Joe Haldeman, Paul Anderson. I think David Drake wrote a story in there. Like just a list of names of people you go, oh, that person too? Oh, okay. And it gives you the inspiration for characters that, if you want rogues and assassins and poisoners and wizards who may or may not give you what you want. As a matter of fact, in the very first story in the book, one of the wizards has a curse on him, and it's like right out the gate, here you go, cursed.
Yeah, great characters. Everything from pimps and scoundrels to gangsters. Jubal, I love the head of the blue mask hawk. Yeah. And Shadow Spawn, the rogue. When I was a teenager, I based so many D&D rogues off of Shadow Spawn.
Right.
It just, I love the fact that there's different authors and the stories all have a little bit of a different voice to them. It just gives so much flavor. Like it's almost a real place seen from like 100 different lenses. I love it. I feel like, if you were a good fantasy writer in the 80s, they probably invited you to come along, and that would have been a journey. But I love it. Non-heroic types you don't see every day. All the schemes and the balance of power between the ruling class and the people they rule, which you don't often see both lenses in the same story often, the same novel or series.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, really well done.
Well, but along with that, so this is something that I've learned about myself over time, is that I really like heroic characters. I don't like anti-heroes.
Okay.
So, like you'll never see me touting any of the Elric stuff. I just, that's not my flavor. You'll never, what is it? Thomas Covenant series. Can't stand them because they're not a heroic character. They don't make heroic choices. They're not that. And that's something that I really dig into with my fantasy.
Okay.
So even though Thieves World, they're not necessarily the good guys, some of the characters aren't necessarily the bad guys either. You can at least sympathize with them more so than a straight up anti-hero.
Right. The characters that are really like, nasty tend to be the villains, and even the rogues that you can root for because you see why they do what they do. I mean, they're surviving, and they're not often evil. But yeah, it gives you a chance to see characters that aren't your straight, warrior slash wizard slash paladin of good going around doing deeds. But yeah, obviously on my list, I love it. And there's so much. You could read through all those books and find a character here or there that gives you some inspiration. And if you want a decadent city to put your players into, there's a lot worse than, using Sanctuary as a model, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you got all, I mean, just what in the first couple of stories, there's fortune tellers and gladiators and scribes and poisoner and elite guards. There's all kinds of stuff in there. I'm like, man, this is just so many things you can just pick out.
Yeah, yeah, and they did all the different authors that let you let themselves just go a little bit. Something I put in my notes about this one is that you don't see all the time is that the warring cults between the gods. In a lot
Oh
of
yeah,
fantasy literature, if gods are mentioned at all, there tends to be one pantheon. That's for the whole realm. In these books, you get the empire, the old gods and the new gods are warring, and they're warring in heaven, and the people are warring on the ground in their name, and it's just like a beautiful cooking dish. This gives a flavor through all the different things. I know I go on and on about this series. I know I gotta read it again. It's been too long.
yeah. So that's like I said, I picked it up again just the other day, and I was looking at it, I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta put this on the list.
All right. So
So
next
that was
one.
mine and yours.
Yeah. You want to go again? Go ahead. I don't care.
No, go ahead. Take another one.
My next one is another classic, the Dragonlance series by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. Obviously, it was based on real D&D adventures written by, back TSR at that time, I believe. And then they wrote the books to follow the campaign adventures. But still, I mean, my camera's going in and out of view here. Hold on a second.
You say you're a little out of focus.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes does that. Okay.
I think it's because you waved your book right up in the camera.
Yeah, my camera does not like changes in the focus going too fast. I think what I love, it's hard to pick one thing I love about this book. The characters are what first drew me in because they're just so lively. And I read it as a teenager, probably like 13, 14 years old, maybe somewhere in there. I was super into D&D, playing it all the time, and a book that wasn't like fantasy I could translate into D&D. This actually was a D&D book, and they had classes. They didn't give you a level of hit point, but no, it wasn't like stat-based per se, but you could definitely see yourself in these characters if you played the game. And as a younger man, I loved that because, and then the world, this homebrew world, all new places. It's a world divided peoples, and then this invasion of dragons and monsters. Just a great premise that I'm actually stealing for the campaign I'm writing right now, because why not? I do that. And I also love that the gods are directly involved. I mean, they affect things on the ground, which not every book has to have that, but so many books shy away from religion. To have one that says, oh no, these gods are real and they'll come down and whoop your ass if you piss them off. That's just a cool concept that, a D&D player likes once in a while, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really funny because I have the exact same book. I have actually the trilogy and a bunch of other ones sitting on the shelf.
Yeah.
And that was one of my parameters, one of my set-asides, because I think those are, I went for more obscure than that. I think those are really clear choices. Like if you really want to read D&D stuff, dive into the Dragonlance series. There's approximately 11 billion of them now. dive into the Forgotten Realms books, dive into Dark Sun or Eberron, or dig up some of the old Spelljammer books, because they're all like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're all specifically oriented towards the game itself. They have the same title as worlds that you would play in. More recently, Eberron, although I'm not sure how recent that actually is anymore. There's a whole list of them. So you're absolutely right. They're absolutely worth it. And particularly with Dragonlance, I don't know how available they are anymore, but they actually did translate all of those characters to playable characters in the game with stats, and they're laid out all the maps for all of the places that they go in actual modules.
Yeah, I have all the modules and the hardback and other things with that. But funnily enough, I only ever played one campaign, and it only lasted maybe 5 or 6 sessions. But I bought all the materials, and I love the book so much. I just want the materials for my edification. And yeah, you're right. There's lots of great D&D based books. Salvatore's obviously is one of the bigger names there with the Dritz series is, and I like them. But I think Dragonlance holds a special place for me because it wasn't an actual campaign setting that the game put out initially. Like TSR didn't build this and then put novels into it. They built this themselves, and the little differences, like the wizards with different robe colors based on alignment, that's not a D&D rule. That's a homebrew rule for this campaign.
Right.
Little things like that I was just like, it just made it different enough that you knew you were getting some D&D stuff, but it still felt like they put real creativity in the world building and didn't borrow directly from what the game company put out. Not to knock anybody's doing that. Those books are great too, but Dragonlance seems to me to be on a little different level personally.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And even if, like you said, even if you don't play all the modules, because I don't think I ever played them all either, those were some of the first modules that I remember seeing. They might not have been the first, but they were the first ones I clearly remember that had tilted the maps so that it was isometric, so that you could see layers. You could see the up and down as you were traveling along the map.
Right.
And I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. I was like, oh, and I tried to draw about 82 of those, and it didn't work.
It's tough, but you're right. It gave the DM, whoever could see the map, saw it a different way than the two-dimensional, and it brought it more to life. I wish I could draw better. I would have done maps for the players like that, but unfortunately, I got to see the good maps, and they saw my crappy renditions that they could see. Okay, so what's next on your list?
So I'm going to do something with the novel that I don't do in my D&D campaign, and I'm going to mix in gunpowder. I don't like mixing in cannons or muskets or any of that stuff to my sword and sorcery. That's a no-go for me. However, I would recommend His Majesty's Dragon, Naomi Novik. I hope I pronounced that right. Because what that gives you is dragons as weapons. The dragons are being used in war, and they describe the cost of what it takes to have your dragon burn down the other opponent's navy.
Mm-hmm.
You have aerial combat, you have the consideration of eggs and the value of various types of dragons and how you go about fighting with that as your combat standard. Plus, it's a great book.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that one was an award winner, right?
I think so, yeah.
Because it's a good story. Above and beyond anything else is a good story, which is really the part that matters about these, I think.
Yeah.
All of these are good stories. It's a great story, and you get the bonus of picking and choosing all these cool little pieces. Like, ooh, that's what they call their flight wing. That's kind of cool. I think I'll use that in my campaign, and I'll have a different group of whatever flying beasties, and we'll call them something else, and that's how that works.
Mm-hmm. We touched on a great point that, obviously we shouldn't miss with all this is that, the reading of these stories is themselves, building that inspiration for our campaigns. And, when you read a good story that's based in fantasy or whatever, it gives you some tools about how to structure a campaign, character arcs, villains you might meet, what kind of allies your characters could meet, what kind of NPCs in town are interesting, and if you can absorb some of these characters into yourself, then when your players go somewhere, I do this all the time in my campaigns where when they go to a town, I'll pull characters usually from TV or movies for the voice, for the mannerisms, if they meet, I love Deadwood, the TV show. One of my main towns I use in my campaign is like that in a lot of ways. It's like this old westerny sort of feel where the saloon owner also runs, hookers and might cut your throat if you do the wrong thing. And, there's all kinds of little stories going on in this town that the characters can discover if they want. And, I'm not smart enough to create, all that on my own without tons and tons of time. So I'll just borrow characters and ideas from these shows and books. And it just allows me to have this huge repertoire of information always back here, ready to go if they stumble onto something where it could be apropos.
I've actually so for those of you taking notes on DMing stuff, I've actually taken to, and that's some of the stuff that's actually right here. When I encounter things like that, I have a notebook filled with, like, it's just tabbed at various places, filled with things like random NPC names, random tavern names. So I don't have to go to like a random generator to make stuff up. If I see something interesting, I write it down in my notes.
Mm-hmm.
So then, because my players, their characters have a tendency, because my players have a tendency to think things like, oh, you want us to go over there? We're not going to do that. What's the name of the tavern in this town? We're going there.
Well, that's good. It makes you think.
It does. It's very challenging to stay ahead of folks that you have a number of nimble and really sharp people that you play with, and staying ahead of those people is a real challenge. So like you say, if you can grab a pre-generated, if you will, personality, something with it doesn't have to be a ton of things, one or two mannerisms, or a weird name. I had one old lady that made cookies in this one town, named Mother Chipmunk, and people went back to her constantly. They're like, "Oh, we're going back through there. We're detouring because we need cookies." Like, it just became a thing. So those sort of characters can be really great and take on a life of their own once you grab them and stick them in there.
Yeah, and you almost always never know which characters or ideas that your players will glom onto. You can think you're devising the most interesting NPC ever made, and your players will be like, yeah, we don't care about that person. This person over here, we will talk to this person again. It's like, I just made this person up on the fly. He's got a one-syllable name of Jack because I didn't think of anything better, but they Jack all like, but they'll do that because they have to follow their own muse. It's just the way we do.
Yeah. Well, and see, the other thing that's really challenging with that is you'll make up that NPC and you'll tack all of these story threads to them, or you'll secretly try to make them the secret bad guy or whatever. There's a bunch of the characters that I've played with in the past that they just pick that guy out of the crowd and be like, no, we burn that guy to the ground first. Like, we're gonna start eliminating some plot threads, and he has to go.
There you go. And you just switch who that guy is. That's okay. So my last one. Did we get all 5 of yours?
I got one more to go, so go ahead.
Okay. Fatford and the Grey Mouser by Fritz Lieber.
You went there. All right, cool.
Pulpy.
Very cool.
Similar in atmosphere, the earlier stories to, Thieves World. You got two guys who are a little roguish of nature, starting off in a big decadent city as thieves. I like again that they're heroic. They're good at heart, but they're not above some larceny. Like most D&D players I know, they mostly do
Yeah.
the right thing, but they might rob you while they're doing something good for you. Maybe.
Count your fingers when you're done.
Exactly. I like the friendship that they form, and I also like how in the later adventures, you know, their initial adventures are not super fantastical. They're fighting against a rival thieves guild. They're doing some jobs, but as the books, I don't know if you've read the whole saga, goes on, they start going. They leave Lankmar. They go to different parts of the world. They start getting into more mystical adventures. I think at one point they actually are rivaling death. They're trying to get out of, death is a real person in the world, and they're trying to challenge him. And so, again, like characters that start off relatively humble, and as they grow in power and level, start encountering bigger and bigger foes and start thinking themselves above regular concerns, for a while until you smack them down really hard and remind them who's what.
Sorry, I chuckled in the middle of that because you said about meeting death, and all I can think of is Bill and Ted. Best of 5.
I haven't seen a new one yet, but I will eventually.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet either. But sorry, sidetracked. So Lankmar is so inspirational. There's actually a game company out there that has acquired the rights to some segment of that world and those characters, and they've actually created D&D compatible, I think. I have to check on that one. But they've created adventures based around that world.
Mm-hmm.
Maps, books, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of the company now. They're worth looking up. If you dig into that, they've got a ton of stuff out there, and it's got some very cool looking things. I bumped into them at a game convention last year, and yeah, they're really cool, and they have the very old school feel. They're like, oh yeah, this is what we do. This is what we did with it. Check it out.
I've played in Waterdeep and Greyhawk City, but I really have never done Lankmar. But I'd love to do Lankmar City as a adventure focal point at some point. But and also these books have like a mythic quality. There, some of the adventures they get into are spiritual. They do wrestle with stuff like with fate and depression. When someone they know dies, they don't just like Conan would just like brush it off and say, life is death. So, but these guys will sit there and get drunk, and be melancholy, with each other when they suffer some kind of loss. And it does make me, I mean, I'm not going to put the word realistic with the characters, but certainly I think Mr. Lieber was trying to make personalities that reflect more how real people might respond to these kind of adventures. But I love those books. I've read them all, I think, unless something else came out in the last 20 years, which could have. Yeah, that's my 5th selection. Just for the sheer pageantry, the characters, and the idea of not your traditional cleric, warrior. They're a little bit a little bit different. These guys.
Yeah, it's fantastic stuff. So anyone that's listening, none of these are bad choices in any way, shape, or form. Dive in and read all of them. And I'm going to add in my last one, Mr. Sanderson.
Way of Kings. Great
Way of Kings. It's a monster in and of itself. It looks like a doorstop, but it doesn't feel like that when you read it. This is massive, immersive, epic fantasy. I mean, it's meaty. There's so much stuff in there. You have these knights that have this armor that they don't really understand all the things about it. They can't reproduce it. You have certain heroic level characters, and then you have less than heroic level characters. Then you have slaves, and all of them go into battle, and you see it, like you say, from multiple perspectives. You have prophets. You have there's so much good stuff in there. And don't let the size of it intimidate you. It may make your hand sore if you read the actual physical paper copy, but
Yeah.
it's worth it.
Yeah. I want to add that I'm not really giving my 5 favorite fantasy novels. Actually, my 2 favorite authors are not on my list, only because I don't think that what they write really lends itself easily to a D&D campaign for more than just coolness factor. I mostly were picking things that I thought that a DM could read and say, oh, I have 10 new ideas now I can put in my campaign. Not just, this is a great story, which, I'm sure we both have a pile of favorite authors.
Oh, absolutely. There were some that I like. Carl Edward Wagner has a series, his Kane books.
Mm-hmm.
Those are fantastic, but they're really hard to find. And it's one of those. It's like, well, they're awesome, and they have Frazetta covers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I mean the thing that drew me to them initially. I was like, ooh, more, and I was like, oh wait, this is different. But they're really hard to find.
Yeah. I love to go to like a used bookstore that has older, like 60s, 70s, early 80s fantasy novels in paperback, just because so much was put out and not all of it made the publishers lists and stuff like that, the awards list and the best-selling list, but just great artwork and inspirational material. But yeah, those are, I think all of them were great choices. Sanderson, yeah, the powered armor. There's a lot of concepts that D&D doesn't typically use. I think that world, the mysticism sort of almost seems like science fiction because it's treated like unknown, like it's an unknown factor. There's no Gandalf telling people how to do stuff in a lot of ways, which is great. I mean, it's a mystery to the people, the characters in the book. And so part of the fun of reading them is for the reader to discover how these things tick. And some really cool ideas. So I love that about it. And yeah, I mean, my mind thinking, I want to meet a DM that can take that book, make a campaign out of it, because I don't know if it would work, but it would be damn awesome to try.
I would just use the setting. I mean, you start getting out and like trying to drop these weird bridges over these crevices, and this is how you have to move troops. And there's a lot of great stuff in there for knights. And if you want big power armor battle kind of stuff, this is dig in. This is the stuff for you.
Definitely, yeah.
So
yeah, those
there's
are yeah.
There's a ton of them out there. Like I didn't touch on a lot of the ones. Like I devoured the Dragonlance stuff when I was a kid, just like you. I also jumped on like David Eddings, the Pawn of Prophecy, that whole series. Raymond Feist, the Magician series.
That was on my backup list. Yeah.
The backup list, the extra 5.
Well, I mean, if it gave it 10, he'd be on there, and he's a great author. And something I read at the same time as like Dragonlance and Thieves World, and it just in my mind they're almost like one huge story with different voices telling them. Yeah, Magician's Apprentice. Talk about going from level 1 to level 100.
Yeah, exactly.
Of the mage.
And there's some other stuff out there that's fantastic stuff. That's Lloyd Alexander, the Black Cauldron.
Yes.
That stuff. God, there's some other ones. Susan Cooper is more modern stuff. Now I'm drawing a blank on that series. I can picture it. The box set is sitting out there. Um, there's just lists and lists and lists. And I think it circles back to the start of this. Find something, read a ton of stuff, because there's always good stuff out there. Even if you read something, like I read a book recently that I really didn't. I was not happy. Someone gifted it to me, and I was like, oh, all right, I got to read it because they've asked me to review it, and it was awful.
Oh.
It was. I struggled with it, and the worst part is I know how hard it is to get your work out there, and I just, within the first 30 pages, I'm like, oh, this is going to be terrible. I was not wrong. But even in the most challenging books like that, there were pieces of it that I could pull from that I could say, oh, I could use that. This sounds, well, now that wizard cast a spell, and that's kind of interesting. I don't recognize it. How would a wizard do that? There were a couple of combinations, like men and women that were working together in a specific way. And I was like, ooh, partner spell casting. So you start even in stuff that you don't super like, you can still pull that stuff out. I'm like, oh, all right, there's an idea, there's a germ of an idea in here. Let's see what we can do with it.
Sure, of course, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the best sellers, but I mean, there's so much else out there that's brimming with, ideas. So, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, I think that we kind of, had a good wrap up here of some of the things we can use. And if you're watching the video, you probably got about at least 6 or 7 books out there you can put on your Amazon list and start reading for inspiration. Not just for DMs, but also for players. I mean, a lot of times people will ask, how do I play this certain role? How should I approach this? They're not trained actors. They don't know how to approach a character and break it down. I'll be like, often I'll say to them, look at this character in this book or this movie, this is sort of along the same lines. Can you emulate some parts of this? And feel free to, to steal ideas. If there's a great, Shadow Spawn, like I said, was my rogue of choice for a good 5 years of my teen years. And it was just, but, I loved him, and I tried to emulate that in my characters, and it gave me a personality to base decisions off of, that's just role playing right there.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So now I'm totally going to pander. Dude, your series, both of your series. Now, I seriously, the first one, Blood and Iron, right?
That's the second series. The first one.
The second series, first book.
Yeah.
It's another not traditional quasi-European setting. It's very different from that. So if you're looking for that, yeah, dude, that's one of the other ones. I was like, that's kind of suck up. Read yours. but it's true. It's a great series, and there's great character relationships in there, and it's not your standard European castles, dragons, and old dark forests. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I wish I saw more campaigns that were willing to take different setting approaches. Nothing wrong. I mean, most of mine happen in the standard European-esque, sort of medieval fantasy-scape, but so refreshing to see someone try something Eastern European, really Far Eastern or Asian or African. I mean, you just don't see it happen a lot. And I kudos to those DMs that take the extra step to make those worlds happen and realize for their characters, the players.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I wanted to dig into some of those other things, because you start talking about Middle Eastern, you start talking about Byzantine, you start talking about various Asian cultures, whatever those cultures are. Some of the gods from India are fantastic in those pantheons. Dig up, what is it, Vishnu the Destroyer? Okay, that sounds a lot like that sounds a lot like a deity that's going to come down and whoop your ass.
As well, the deities and demigods, we talked about that in our last video. I've read through that cover to cover so many times for inspiration as a DM, just for cultural references and neat story ideas and, that whole mythic, sense. And if you can find books that do the same thing, steal from them, for your campaigns. Your players will love it.
Yeah, yeah, it gives it such vitality. It gives a vision to people when you can say to them, it looks like this. These are the colors in it. These are the things that you'll see, these are things you'll hear, and they're a little bit different. They're a little bit not what you get every day. And I think that's one of the really big aspects of Dungeons and Dragons is it allows you to get away,
Definitely.
at
Yeah.
least to some degree.
Escapism. Yep. That's a big part of it. All right. Well, this is great, man. Thanks again for coming on. We appreciate it.
Awesome. I love being here. So we got to do this again. I have a list of
Yeah.
topics. We hit art today.
That's
We
on the
can
list.
we can talk movies. Not that long ago, I published out on my blog. I published my top 10 sword and sorcery movies.
We can
So
get down this together and give some thoughts on those. I'm sure I've seen most of them.
I guarantee you've seen them all.
Well, I guess the Eye of the Beholder now, so you got me on that list.
Yeah. Jump out there, check it out because it's an amazing story about the art of D&D, and we can dive into that kind of stuff.
Awesome. All right, buddy.
All right.
Thank you
Awesome.
so much. Until next time, this has been my friend Eric Hardenbrook, and thanks for watching Attacks of Opportunity. We'll catch you next time. Please hit the subscribe button below. That's how we grow. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.